As the quest for knowledge continues to progress forward, we find ourselves still asking questions about human behavior, social technology, and the future of mankind. In a world devoid of such discussion, 2 Crowder College instructors have been chosen to podcast their views on current events, weird science, and pop culture. And now, broadcasting from Crowder College, this is Psych Out with Nathan and Jason.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow!
Welcome to Psych Out, episode, is it 36?
36.
Man, it's getting up there.
Yes.
It's more podcasts than I am years old.
Yes, absolutely.
So.
And it was like that long ago for me.
No, look at that. That was like a dig on me.
We'll actually talk about episode 31 later, but my favorite so far because of the artwork we had, my age number, and the subject material since it was video games. Because I remember you saying Podcast of Steel was your favorite.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyways, episode 36. This one might go down as one of our favorites because this is our LGBT feature.
Right, we brought a fan favorite back. Drew Feather is going to do an interview for us, so I guess people like him more than us, but that's fine.
Drew Plumage.
I like him more than I like me, so that's okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do our usual current events, weird science, and then talk to Drew in our interview section. So a couple of our current events are in the LGBT realm, some are not. So I want to start it first with one because it's Monday when we record. We post on Wednesday. And as of Monday morning, New Jersey is the newest state to join with gay marriage.
Mm-hmm. And New Jersey's notable because they have as governor Chris Christie, who is like a front runner for the Republican nomination in 2016. So,
and I believe I read that he was planning to appeal this decision or to put paperwork to try to counter this, but just pulled back.
Yeah, so. That was the news story that was on Google News, was that Chris Christie took away the block that he was going to have.
Right. So things are, I say, smooth sailing, and as smooth as this procedure can be. We saw a lot of men and women in the various courthouses getting married. So you see this picture. It's always exciting.
And that's a 14th state. And so,
14.
Wow, that's like, I don't know. I put myself in a predicament where I think
he was about to give us a percentage, but then panic realizing he hadn't gotten the number.
Would it be 28%? It's just 14 times 2 because there's 50 states, right? Unless we're talking about Guam. So,
the protectorate.
Gay rights supporters cheered the administration's sudden reversal, and there we go. And again, just like dominoes, we had a couple months ago, the Supreme Court saying that it was, it's been so long, but just basically, they reversed DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. And so there's no hurdles for states to, just be hateful to our lesbians and gay friends.
Right.
So there
very
we go.
Interesting, fun times there. Now you brought something to the table you wanted to talk about.
Well, the first thing I was going to talk about was the interview last week.
Yes. I didn't know if this should be like a closing wah-wah, but since we haven't done that for a while, we might as well address the fact that, yes, we did not have the interview, though we did allude to it. I put the teaser on the podcast, the disclaimer, but fair enough, some listeners missed it because it was the robot lady talking. But yes, we did have a technical problem. We promise we will get that interview.
Yeah. We'll reschedule the Russ Hopper interview, and the problem is that me and Nathan have gotten so comfortable in this new studio that we didn't know that if we have to reschedule an interview that nothing's going to be here.
The equipment might not be here. And we've said before, big thanks to Mike and Travis to set this up, but occasionally they have to go to conferences and they need their equipment.
Absolutely.
We did not have that planned well.
And future Jason, if you're listening to this, you have yet to email Mike Jernigan to say, can you be here on Tuesday? because Russ is going to have the same problem next time.
Yes.
So we've got to make sure
we do.
But anyways, Russ Hopper, we said numerous times, he's the leader of the Merit Center on campus, which is the LEED gold standard, however you want to say, most efficient energy building in the country.
Head of the science of supervillainy.
I said world, but it's Missouri.
In the whole world. One day Russ Hopper will take over the world.
Yeah.
We're quite confident of that.
Now, I had my other news was going to be not necessarily anything that's current events, but going back to the LGBT stuff. Vladimir Putin, whenever he stepped in to say, hey, everybody, let's not bomb each other over Syria, chemical weapons, he got a Nobel Peace Prize for, he got a nomination for a Nobel Peace Prize for that. And that really kind of made me take a second look at that, because it's the same thing with Obama, where whenever he got a Nobel Peace Prize for going to war the same year, Vladimir Putin has a very strong stance against homosexuals. And so for this year, for him to get a Nobel Peace Prize, he's not very peaceful to gay people. So, and in the same calendar year, Russia, so we're talking about the United States and Russia, Russia has new anti-gay legislation, which basically says you can't prohibit gayness in public for fear that 18 or under people will see it. And so what that means is you just can't be gay in public. You can't hold hands, you can't kiss, and this is very discriminatory because, well, straight people can kiss, so, you know, what's
right, the contributing to delinquency of a minor was the and remind me, or even remind listeners, Jason, that's what your big debate competition was about, right? Like, it was basically arguing, should a boycott happen in the Olympics, but that was under the umbrella of because these issues are happening.
Whenever a country takes a stance on boycotting Olympics, it's because of human rights violations. Like if we're gonna go to let's say China for the Olympics, and it was like this whenever it was like the Beijing Olympics. Yeah. Well, they have terrible human rights violations over there. Like those people at Foxconn who work 24 hours a day, not joking, and they even have to have nets around the windows so they can't commit suicide. Yes. We go to those countries and literally support those countries by playing in the games. Like this weekend, the Crowder debate program went to Warrensburg, and that basically means we support the Central Missouri debate program. On a tangential note, did you know, speaking of last week's story, the student that is the alleged rapist, he's now a student at UCM. Yeah. So UCM doesn't support that student, but he is unfortunately on the campus.
And I did want to bring that up too. I forgot when our little pre-planning period, but the fact that we talked about it, not that we're responsible for this, but soon after that news story made the headlines, that case is reopening. A big national outcry to investigate that further.
And Anonymous said that they were going to go after the people. And if anybody doesn't know who Anonymous is, it's essentially a super big group of the best computer hackers in the world. Yeah. And so let's just say if Anonymous decided to just hack everything with Nathan Gandy over here, his life would be ruined. Yes. And so I like the fact that they are advocating like people just doing good things. And if they catch wind that somebody in a small town like Maryville is up to no good, like Anonymous will sick them. And they've done it like the Westboro Baptist Church, and I think they did some stuff with Julian Assange as well. I'm not the most inept what am I trying to say there? I'm not the most knowledgeable person on Anonymous, but I do know that they are like they're very, I don't know, supportive of people doing the right thing, and if you don't,
they've taken they are unorganized at its core, but they do tend to latch on to perceived social issues, whether right or wrong. That is kind of their banner. So that came back in the news, like I said, just a day or two after we talked about it. Suddenly there's a reinvestigation, so we'll see where that goes.
And so we went off on a couple tangents there. So anyway, Sochi Olympics, Russia has anti-gay legislation, and there's a drumbeat building that we should maybe boycott the Sochi Olympics. And then I was going to say, so you have Russia on one side saying they're anti-gay, and then you have Obama being the first president to support the legalization of gay marriage, basically calling him the first gay president, even though he's not gay. Right.
And so that was a headline.
And it's what I'm calling my debate team the new chilly war between the United States and Russia. Right. Because like Russia has they're still harboring Edward Snowden, right? The guy that gave away all the NSA secrets. And also just, kind of like their support of the Assad regime in Syria. All these things total kind of have us in a not-so-friendly relationship with Russia right now. It's
been quite a few years, since the 1980s. So look forward to your movie villains being Russian in the next few years. So, one last note on the Russian Olympics, because this is it is a current event, but it's more of a future event. They've released, several photos of the construction site of where they're building, because every country has to build all the facilities. Yeah. They are not close to being ready.
They're one of the pieces of evidence that I came across during the discussion of Sochi Olympics was that it could possibly be the biggest just collapse like ever because they're putting so much money into it. Because whenever you host these things, you want to do a good job. And Sochi's not ready. The most a country has not been ready for an Olympics ever.
It's great. There was this is a side story, but my wife likes to watch a world event called Eurovision, which is a bunch of countries in Europe have like music competition. And similar to that, the country that wins, they get to host it in their country next year. So it's a big, millions and millions of people, billions of dollars, huge event, arguably global event. But she was telling me there was one year, I want to say it was Spain, but one of the competitors was, in the top 3, but they really didn't want to win. Because the financial burdens of hosting, millions and millions of people from different countries would have just wiped them out. They would have been bankrupt.
Tulsa, Oklahoma was up for a Winter Olympics or a Summer Olympics in 2024 or something like that. That's totally wrong, but I know they were up for it, and they didn't want it either because Tulsa,
they just didn't think they could do it.
And think about it, like Nathan, like if you knew that the Summer Olympics were just an hour and a half away, you'd want to go, right?
Absolutely.
I don't even know what events are at. Curling, I'll go see.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll talk about my friend. It's my friend's hormone therapy during Weird Science. So unless you have anything else for current events, I think that wraps it up.
No, I think that's it. So we'll take a breather here. When we come back, we've got some weird science. In this case, maybe just some science you didn't know about the LGBT community and the science of sexuality. So we'll see you then. Welcome back to Psych Out here, and we are going to talk about some weird science. So Jason and I had a discussion earlier about, we should be careful. When we say weird, we aren't necessarily saying people are weird who are in the LGBT community. But frankly, sexuality is weird science. Even heterosexuality is something psychologists don't fully understand. Like, we know about the same time, puberty, something happens in our brain, near the limbic system and other areas. But exactly what turns the switch that now you like the opposite sex or the same sex or, what is going on there? We don't know. It's still a mystery to us.
And also, just to piggyback on that, we said piggyback like 5 times today. But anyways, like thinking about sexuality and changing, like, there's a time in your life where you absolutely just love mom, right? You love mom, and then there's a switch. It's like, I don't love mom anymore.
Right.
Go away, mom. Don't get close to my junior high.
Maternal paternal stories are full of this. But that's true. In adolescence, again, another good indicator. Something is happening neurologically, socially, emotionally, everything that's changing that. I tell the story to people before. I vividly remember having a talk with my mom. I was maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, and she was like, in a year or two, there's going to come a time where you think everything I say is stupid. This is going to happen. Like, and I remember as a kid, I like my mom, I like my dad. I was like, no, surely not. But yeah, you're right. There's that weird shift in identity. And so sex and sexuality is a huge part of this. But as Jason and I have talked about on previous podcasts, we do live in a culture that doesn't want to talk about it, is embarrassed by it.
So we'll talk about it.
So we will. And if you want to study it scientifically, well then, there it is weird because you want to study sex. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I think our stories today are going to revolve around hormone therapy, which is the T in LGBT for the transgendered. And Nathan's going to lead us off with, whether it's insensitive or not, this is just a pretty weird story.
It is, and for the people involved, we'll admit it was a weird story. All right, so I want to talk about ABC News editor Don Ennis, who basically in May of this year had gone or started to identify as the opposite sex. And so what we're talking about here is the word transgender. Sometimes called transsexual, but that's kind of loose nomenclature. For any of you guys who aren't familiar with transgender, this is not you like the same sex. And in fact, transgender qualities tend to appear before even sexuality appears, but not always, as in this case. It's not that you suddenly like the same sex. What transgender means is you are certain you are physically the wrong sex. So I am a male, I have an XY chromosome on the 23rd pair. If I was transgendered, I feel at my core I am a woman. Not that I need to like things differently, not that I I want to wear dresses, but I'm not allowed because I'm a boy, so now I want to be a girl. That's not necessarily transgender. That's society who gets to wear what. Transgendered is, at my core, I am a woman or I am a man. And this is kind of lumped under what in psychology we often call gender identity disorders. And these are very not, it's terrible grammar, but basically we know very little about these. Because again, we know very little about sexuality in general, as I said before. So here's a gentleman who started identifying, and in fact, he went through several phases of this. Now, he had a family, he was married. His friends, his coworker, and even his wife supported him in this, actually. Okay, so now he started dressing as a woman. He did go through, and as Jason will talk about, hormone therapy, which not all transgender people do, but basically, if you've ever wondered why are men, why do they have more hair than women? Why do women have more curves than men? It's a side effect of a level of hormones, testosterone or other androgens for men, estradiol or estrogens for women, and men and women have both. Like, we have both right now, you just have different proportions. So if you're a male, you have like about an 18 times spike in testosterone around puberty. But you still have a 2 times increase in estrogen. So there's still a change, but it's just out of proportion.
And let me ask a layperson question. So testosterone, is that kind of derived from our testes as well?
That's what part of the name shared the same. Testes, so like testes or ovaries in women, those help produce the hormones. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
And so we have these levels. So what some transgendered individuals do is they will go through, months and years of hormone therapy to create the physical look. So maybe a softening of voice, more curves. That would be estrogen. If Jason and I were to have higher levels of estrogen, we would see those, what we call secondary sexual characteristics.
I can't believe you said that, Nate.
Are you Shemet now from New York?
Yeah. Go ahead.
And so now here's a story of a gentleman who is transgendered, who has gone through the changes, who has been accepted, who's been living this life for a while, and unexpectedly, I think it was just a month ago, had a seizure.
Okay, so a transgender guy has a seizure.
Okay, so he calls himself his Dawn, as in a woman's name. He's gone over these changes. He's living as a woman. Family supports him. He has a seizure, and he experiences a 2-day bout of amnesia. He thought it was 1999. And so he had no knowledge of going through the transgender change. Now, when
he woke up from a seizure,
he had female qualities, like he had breasts and curves.
And where did these come from?
And his quote was like, he says, I thought I woke up to a practical joke. Like, he thought his wife was playing a joke on him. He had no memory of this.
His mind just reset. Back to normal, right?
Now, in about 2 or 3 days, his memories did return, as in he remembered going through the changes, remembered the stuff. But at this point, after that seizure, had no desire, no interest of to be a woman. Like, he was, again, back in the spectrum. I'm a man, which he was biologically. And so, again, I don't have a specific reason. In fact, this is just one of those case studies that's going to be studied for a long time to try to figure out what happened. It definitely shows that something neurologically was pushing him towards feeling like a female and being a female. Something scrambled that system, sort of reset. I think that's a good word. Kind of reset that. And to be clear, some people were, I say some people, usually internet commenters that don't know what they're talking about, were like, well, he just changed his mind and faked it or whatever, And to be clear, he's been very open. Like, I don't regret my experiences. I'm still a firm supporter of the LGBT community. I think, I totally support this, but something has changed, and I have reverted back to this specific. And if you've ever heard of things, and this is not really what we're going to talk about today, but you've heard about those very rare cases that do like sex reassignment surgeries, where they actually physically take on qualities through surgery to be male or female. Hormone therapy might be part of that, but realize in the transgender world, if you go those roads, we're talking about years of therapy, not just hormone therapy, actual psychological therapy to make sure this is a good decision for you. So this is not an overnight, I changed my mind thing. This is a progression. You're committed, right? You're committed. And we don't just give hormones out because people want them. It takes therapy and evaluation to make sure this is a legitimate life choice and that you can do this healthily. So just, again, I don't have a conclusion, I don't have a moral, but it was a weird story the family gets. Like,
keep our eyes on it.
Suddenly, a seizure led to an identity change, in this case linked to sexuality, or sex, not sexuality, linked to male or female. So I thought that was interesting. And Jason, you had a more personal story about hormone therapy and what it's like to go through that. So why don't you tell us a bit about that?
I don't know what the percentages are of men that one day take on a persona of a female or vice versa, but I have and I would say a really close friend of mine who changed genders over the summer, and she is insistent on being called Natalie Weiss. And it was a student of mine back at Barton, and actually one of my 2 national championships that I've ever had. One being JJ, that a lot of our listeners probably know. But back in the day, I had an interp student named Nathan Weiss who won Program World Interpret Novice National. So his name was Nathan. But now he goes by Natalie, and she's recently began hormone therapy. And I asked her a question over Facebook, and kind of like, what was that feeling at first? And she said exactly what you were referring to, is that even after the first dose, she kind of had like an overhaul sensation where she probably had like those, dare we say, high emotions for females, but it almost felt like there was a big weight lifted off of her chest, because what you were saying earlier is like she's not a gay man.
Right.
She feels like a straight woman, but trapped in a man's body.
Right.
And that can be very unsettling, because you in your mind know you're a woman, but you have the male parts, right? And so whenever you start taking these hormone therapies, I can assume that's when you finally start feeling like yourself.
Right.
And I want to say that Natalie is about 28, 29. And so imagine just like the first 28, 29 years of your life not really feeling like yourself. How much of a great burden that must be.
Right. And again, I'm not a therapist or a clinician in sexuality, but I can say what little I know about gender identity disorder. It is clear that many of the cases do manifest in early childhood. Like you said, you could be years of this, like, not that, I like girl things, but I'm a boy. That's a whole different, that's gender role stuff that we can talk about another day. But literally, I am the wrong sex. Like, something is wrong here. And in fact can even cause harm. I mean, there's enough clinical stories of boys or girls trying to basically mutilate themselves because they realize this is the thing keeping me, or in their mind as a young kid, this, if I have this organ, that's what's making me a boy, and if I don't have it, I will be a girl. Very fascinating, very difficult, very little understood.
Well, we've spent all of Weird Science talking about hormone therapy. Now I think we should talk about Oreos.
Yes, I did promise Jason, in part because he's not wrong. Several people have talked to me about this, and I guess it was a pretty interesting and trending article about comfort food and how much of it is in the realms of actual addictive substances. So, Jason, why don't you feed it to the audience? Oh, that was a bad one.
Oh,
not what
and we'll snack back to episode 4. That didn't even make sense.
No, you're just throwing food words.
Episode 4, Psych Out Historians. And boy, remember when we couldn't even remember, like we were episode 12 and we couldn't remember what we talked about in 2? Like, just pick random 23. What was we talking about there? But anyway, I know. One of my favorites is episode 4 because we were talking about the bliss point.
Yes.
Remember that? Where it's like food companies are making food so delicious that we can't, quote, have just one, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a snacky cake. It could be a cheesy poof. I'm talking like Cartman from South Park. But anyways, this caught a lot of steam over the past week, and I had to bring it up. But anyways, from The Guardian, there's new research coming out that says Oreos are as addictive as cocaine.
Can't have just one.
So, are you talking about cocaine or Oreos, Nathan?
A little bit of it.
So, psychologists, what are they talking about here? Like, are we waiting at the convenience store being like, I gotta get
right. And to clarify those of you who are listening, when we say addictive, we don't mean as dangerous. So sometimes I guess like you're saying Oreos are as bad as cocaine. No, I promise cocaine, much shorter trip to problems.
Okay, sure.
But when they say, and I'll have to see their specific research, when they talk about are as addictive, it's a reminder of that bliss point that, as you perfectly mentioned earlier, we can chemically or alter foods in a way we realize that these certain parts of the limbic system, such as near the hypothalamus and amygdala, that are stimulated, that basically reinforce the pleasure centers. Some substances are, quote, more addictive because they activate those systems. They activate that pleasure center. The same way that if I say something nice to you, you're going to see that center light up more than if I yell at you. You're just going to see more activity there. Well, food is some of the things that activate those centers. Drugs have certain things that activate those pleasure centers. There's a famous study, actually, speaking of like food and such, where they wired into mice's brains into that pleasure center, and they wired that into a button. And so all you have to do is hit that button, and you get that awesome feeling. And those mice all died.
Yeah.
Because instead of eating or drinking, they just pushed that button like, this is awesome. You know, and it was done to talk about addiction. And even if it's fast food, not, you know, hard drugs, it's a reminder that if these things are constantly tapping at those pleasure centers, it is hard to put those down. You know, we always...
And it's a physical dependence.
Right. And I think this is important, too, because whenever we talk about, like, you know, we do have an obesity problem. We do have an exercise problem, all sorts of things like that. Whenever that discussion comes up, I often will hear someone immediately jump to, well, just stop it, defend.
Yeah,
you know, like,
it's just almost offensive.
Yeah, just quit it. You know, I don't have that problem, so you should.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that these things are more than just filling our stomach. They are activating on parts of our brain that tell us, you need to keep doing this. Like, it's important. And I don't even necessarily mean, you know, the food manufacturers are like, mwahaha, I'm going to make you eat this Oreo. I don't know if that's true. But, you know, there are substances like chocolate's a good example that just naturally activate those centers of our brain. So you got to be very careful when you start saying, well, just quit doing that thing that I don't think you should do. Well, pleasure center.
And the reason that that is offensive is because you're basically telling the person, I found the answer. It's no, you can't do that. Well, no,
you're just like me. So.
It's harder than that. Like your brain, like you said, is telling you that this is good. You have to do it.
Absolutely.
You know, and if you've ever seen, this is getting real dark, but like if you've ever seen like any documentaries on drugs and like people that are like intervention on that what is it?
I think
TLC?
TLC or MTV.
You'll see the people that are you know, they're getting ready to take heroin injections, and they're like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, and it's like, but their arm is almost like having to do it. So it's got to be easier said than done.
So I guess moral of the story: be careful around those snack foods and things. We call them comfort food for a reason. They're stimulating that brain, so you might want to at least decrease the amount available.
Oreos and hormone therapy. All on weird science.
I'm sure there's a joke there about comfort food, but I'm too tired to make it. So we will stop there, and when we come back, we'll have an awesome interview with Drew Feathers, the visual representation.
Angry Bird Feathers.
Angry Bird Feathers. We'll see you then.
Episode 36 of Psych Guy is brought to you by Crowder Theater's production of Sylvia. Woohoo! Tell us about Sylvia, Drew. What's the synopsis of it?
Sylvia is a play written in the late 90s, mid-90s, from playwright A.R. Gurney, and it's about a couple in New York who is probably in their early 50s, and Greg, the husband, he's pretty much kind of down on his luck. He hates his job, he's in the finance industry, and he has a fight with his boss, and he leaves work early, goes to the park, and he finds out Sylvia, and they bond.
Sylvia's the name of the dog.
And they bond, and he brings Sylvia home, and by having her cross the threshold into the apartment, she kind of, you know, ultimately changes their lives. For good, and, you know, maybe some for good, some for bad. Bad for, you know, his wife. They don't necessarily get along at first, and so.
And you're not gonna give away the surprise, but there are some big surprises in Sylvia, right?
There are a few surprises in Sylvia, yes.
Okay, the play runs Thursday through Saturday, this October 24th through 26th. So if it's past October 24th, 2013, you just missed it. But if you're listening to this the day that it comes out, get tickets this weekend. And you're just telling me Thursday night, we get what since we can attend?
Well, Thursday night we're having, you know, hors d'oeuvres before the show for our patrons and our ad sales people, or people that have, you know, supported us through the years. But
yes,
good friends too can come.
Did a dozen costume changes for you in one play?
That's right. So come by for a brownie and a fruit skewer.
Yeah, a brownie and a fruit skewer. Okay, these and I know from past experience, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday showings are at 7:30 with a special 2 p.m. Saturday matinee.
Correct.
General admission $8. If you're Crowder staff or Crowder student, $4, and senior citizens $5. So it doesn't matter, young or old, gay or straight, staff or students, come to the show. It's rated PG for content and language.
Yes.
Some language.
Some strong, a few words of strong language, and a couple of strong scenes.
But you know who's not invited? Dogs.
Dogs.
Womp womp.
For more information, call 455-5470. You can always stay updated with Crowder Theater at facebook.com/Crowder College Theater, all one word. And before we wrap up the live read, do you want to plug a little bit about the Huck Finn auditions?
The Huck Finn auditions were this week, and they went well, and the show is cast, and that show is in December.
Okay, so you can't be in the show, listeners. You can watch Huck Finn in December, and it's not like the book adaptation. It's actually for kids, right? It's a kids show.
It's for kids. Yeah.
Okay, and last but not least, do you have the dates for the student one acts?
The student one acts are Wednesday and Thursday, November.
I'll put you on the spot.
13th and 14th. Yeah, 13th and 14th at 1:30, and then Saturday the 16th at 7:30. And there are 2 one acts.
All right, and we will also have information as that date gets closer. But this week, Crowder Theater is producing Sylvia, a story about, like what Drew just said, a couple who gets a dog. So hopefully you join us this week. Any last words, Drew?
Come out and see the show.
Woof, woof, woof. See Sylvia.
Oh, God. Welcome back to Psych Out, where we're here with our guest, Drew Feathers from the theater department. And last time we had you on, you were in a different position, but now you want to announce to those who don't know your new slot, your new
Yes, now
authority.
I am considered the interim theater director this year. Hopefully that will transition into the...
So is it a thing where, like, because J.P. Dickey was the theater head, he's now doing one of our dean positions or assistant dean positions. So is it as much you have to do a good job, or that J.P. has to do a good job so he doesn't revert?
I think it's as much as he has to do a good job.
Everyone falls back to the right
Right.
position. That's a lot of pressure. All right, good to know. Well, we brought you back for a couple of reasons. Of course, we're going to plug a play that's coming up this week as we post, but we'll talk about more of that at the end and in the live read. But I was telling, I almost called you JP. I was telling you earlier, one of the reasons I brought him here was he's a victim of casual conversation. When we filmed our last interview, or recorded our last interview, we were just chatting about various subjects and things I hope to talk about one day. And I don't know who started it, but you made the reference of you thought it would be interesting if an LGBT group was on campus. And it was kind of just a side thing that we said. But as I told you, I made a little note that said, okay, well, when we talk about this, he's coming back and he's going to talk about it whether he wants to or not. So you are here to be, say resident expert, but we don't actually have a club or thing. But I want to first talk about something you told me before we started was it sounds like there's interest, and not from us or anything, you were getting questions from other students. You want to talk a little bit about what you heard?
Just earlier today I was walking through the student center and a student approached me about, being a faculty sponsor for said LGBT group on campus, and I was like, wow, they're going to do one? And she said, well, we're getting signatures together and we need a faculty sponsor. And I said, well, if you could give me some more information on that, I would be happy to look at it. But it's interesting because I think now is the time as Crowder is growing. We still have that small, small campus atmosphere, family atmosphere. But I think Crowder needs one of those groups. I think we have individuals on campus that could benefit from a group like that. And they have all sorts of different groups that are, club organizations. So why not have an LGBT group?
Sure. And this is, I don't have any data for Crowder, but this is just using sort of national statistics. What are we, about 5,000 students? We're close to 6,000 students, right? And you look at between 5 and 10% of the population typically identifies with LGBT status. I mean, that's 500, 600, upwards to 1,000, depending on how people classify themselves. That's a significant portion. That seems like plus or minus, certainly for a smaller town, but yeah, I can see how that would need to be serviced. Now, what was the name of the organization this student pitched to you? Because it wasn't, I've heard of PFLAG, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. Exactly. Yeah.
Correct.
But this was, what was it again?
She said GSA.
GSA.
Gay Straight Alliance.
Gay Straight Alliance. So again, I guess sounding again like PFLAG, we're kind of a bridging both worlds of sort of that sexual spectrum.
And I think GSA is a pretty generic term for just coming up with the beginning of a club.
Right.
There's all sorts of different names out there, but you could have we're Out Proud or whatever name you come up with.
Right.
We are a branch of GSA.
GSA. I got you. Cool. So we're adding to the growing sea of acronyms that
Yes.
I can't remember. Well, that's pretty cool. Now, we were talking earlier, and so I want to kind of get your opinion on, since you heard this from a student, and we were even talking a bit about when you were in school, which you and I are not that far removed from college. It's not exactly, decades and decades ago that we were in high school or college. But do you get a sense that, maybe from this student as a good example, general attitudes in this, let's say, college student demographic is changing? I won't talk about faculty or things at the moment, but just in terms of the student populace, do you think, versus 10 years ago, even, is there a big enough difference, or do you think it's always kind of been there and just no one's taken the jump?
I think it's always kind of been there and no one has taken the jump, like you said, but I think it's been kind of, it might be around like 60-40 out there. I think that people would embrace it as long as it doesn't get too crazy, but I think that with any group, as soon as you start, if you do too many activities and people are like, oh, they're doing that again or something, and I think that's with anything.
You're
so I think that maybe if they start out slow, I think they'll be embraced.
Right. So I guess so you develop tolerance first, and then you develop acceptance after tolerance.
Right.
To kind of get used to that. So that makes sense too. Now I want to shift gears a little bit to the theater. You got a production coming up, and we'll get to the specifics there. But I was kind of picking your brain. I want you to share your thoughts with the audience of, there's at least that stereotype. Whether or not it's founded in any evidence, it's always anecdotal, but the stereotype has been that the theater and those sort of liberal arts pursuits, theater and music being our two different backgrounds, are draw more students of the LGBT community. Now, again, whether that's perception or actual numbers, I wanted you to kind of speak on what is your feel as one who works in that field? Is it truly a balance, or is it more of a just perception of openness versus?
I think it's perception of openness. That's something that you hear in the arts all the time. It's like the arts is just, it's just flooded with gay people. And I think it might have been more so in recent decades, the past few decades, than now. I think now you will see, obviously LGBT people in any kind of profession. But I think, especially in the theater, I think it just, you have that sense of openness. We're creating all sorts of different things and getting ideas from all sorts of different people. So
Right.
I think that just having that environment there of creativity it just seems like a natural playground to have LGBT people.
Sure. And I guess theater by definition, it's, taking on new roles, new identities, that sort of experimentation of identity. And certainly I would imagine adolescence is difficult enough trying to figure out who you are, and then if you have the sexual component on there, when more specifically sexual minority, which is sort of, I don't know if I've explained that word. In psychology, we typically use the word sexual minority because it's just a numbers thing in terms of, if you look at sexuality as a spectrum, 90%-ish, the majority still tend to identify with what euphemistically called heterosexual or opposite attraction. So we use that word minority to say any of the, and I guess like the acronym LGBT, anyone in that spectrum we kind of lump together. But yeah, I've always wondered about, are the arts truly skewed, or, as you said, before we recorded, maybe it's just not, chemistry jobs or physicists. There's not a either reason or social pressure or whatever to be open or closed or anything sexually. So maybe it just isn't recognized there.
Right.
You're talking a bit, because I want to actually piggyback off that with some history, because I just love to include that. You had mentioned earlier about sort of the origins of theater and actors and it being an all same-sex experience. Could you kind of tell listeners, not sexuality, but in terms of who was allowed to be an actor?
Yeah, I kind of go over this in my classes a lot just to kind of, cover any misconceptions as far as that, because, people are like, people that are taking beginning theater class are like, oh, it's like the theater's just filled with gay people, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that's probably just something you've heard. You don't really have any facts on it. Whereas, if we look at society in all sorts of different professions, we see men doing everything.
Yes.
And so, men as, kings, men as apprentices, everything. And it was just like that way with theater. There were no, barely any women actors. And I'm talking from like Greek times up until now. Our theater history is based on Greek theater. And there is some evidence of women performing, but primarily all of the famous Greek tragedy roles were performed by men.
Certainly.
And it was, and young boys training as apprentices to take on those male parts, it was a society thing. It wasn't a gay thing.
Right. It was simply male have power, that's your job, and it was uncouth for women to participate in such things. Off the top of your head, just to keep on that history bent, when did we start to see a change? Like, when did we start to accept that as a women role, or maybe, I think you even alluded to, begin to believe men should not be effeminates in roles?
Well, even during like Shakespeare's time, men played women's parts and women played men's parts, because they weren't as superior as men. And but kind of like around like the Restoration and later on in the Victorian times, we started seeing more and more women's roles. Women started having more and more authority.
Do you think that was maybe that sort of religious, philosophical pressure of, again, men should now not be feminine?
I think a little bit. I think that throughout time we saw playwrights introducing more and more iconic women's parts, and that they, actually gave the role to a woman, and they saw what they could do with it. And so throughout time, it's like, they kind of looked to this woman to doing it, and then that woman copied that woman, and it built on that.
Unless you're Tennessee William play, women stay away. They're frightening for you. They never end well.
It's funny because just to piggyback on that a little bit, in the Japanese theater, in the Eastern theater, the kabuki theater, men playing the women's roles, they're iconic, wearing the white makeup and the fancy costumes and everything. And at one point, the government allowed women to play it, but the women, for some reason, weren't as appealing as the men playing the roles. So the men playing the women's roles have basically made the kabuki theater famous.
It's sort of the celebrity of, a lady did it, but it wasn't as good as that guy.
Exactly.
Did it.
So
it's interesting.
It's interesting to see that.
Who plays a good woman? Not that woman. That's interesting. Yeah, I've heard a bit of kabuki and no, but like you said, we're Western Greco-Roman focused, so I don't have much of a education there. When you were because since we talked a bit about high school and college, when you were in high school and college, kind of to go back to the club idea or angle, was that stuff, I guess I should ask, when did you finish high school, if you don't mind me asking?
In 97.
All right, I was 96. We're about the same age. So a couple of decades ago, were you in Missouri, right? You're in the Missouri area. Was things like PFLAG, student club, is that even whispered or talked about, or is that just not on
Not in my school, but it was. I think I remember like seeing probably a few books out on the subject at like a Hastings or a Books and Building about that subject even beginning to be published, as far as getting support out for those things. But it was still probably pretty hush hush.
Because that was more, I guess, one of the first cities I remember going to Missouri as a college student and adult was Columbia. So of course, university city. But that was also my exposure to what I would even call and I put this in air quotes, a gay community, meaning enough people banded together to have an identity on display. Not like, hey, let's not talk about it because like that.
Right.
And that was kind of interesting for me, again, small town Louisiana, not having that kind of exposure. So I wondered, was this indicative of just we're farther north from my hometown, or more is it just a larger city?
Maybe just a larger city.
Yeah. So just more people bonded, build that community kind of thing. Which kind of brings us back to Neosho, the idea of, in your mind, and again, I know we're just making predictions, not based on data because it hasn't happened yet. Do you think the college is ready? Like if, let's say, someone stepped up, the numbers went in, and it was voted yes, so not institutionally ready, but just as college students and faculty, do you think we're finally at a point where, like it or not, we would just tolerate it? It would just be like, yeah, okay, it's another thing, it's cool.
I think that we could be, and I think it's probably something that would be good for the college. As far as just image, more going along the lines of acceptance and everything. I think that Crowder's is bigger than ever, and I think that if they had a group on campus like that, that could only, start out small and see where it goes from there.
Right. So I love what you said about sort of that inclusiveness, because it seems like that's even part of, look at any college brochure, I can have a picture, there's a guy, there's a woman, they're different races, that kind of idea that we're already trying to pitch the image of anybody come here. But that is kind of that component that, not really comfortable yet, or, no, we shouldn't. Now, we were talking about before we recorded, though, we can't be that many generations away. If you just look at any polling data, each successive student generation is more accepting of same-sex institutions. In fact, we talked about some things and current events before this interview. So do you think we're along, let's say that we just don't hear anything back from this particular student or this particular group? Do you think we're that far from it appearing at Crowder?
No. I think it should be appearing probably pretty soon. Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to pitch our way or anything? We'll talk about your play in the live read, but anything in terms of the spectrum of either LGBT issues that you've seen students? You've kind of mentioned when you were, in high school, college versus, you see people in the cafeteria here and there, things like that. Do you feel like it's becoming a more comfortable environment? Forget clubs and things, but just environment.
Again, I would kind of say 50-50, depending on who is around. But I think that just as we kind of move into a different time, we need to just be accepting of all people,
right?
And all colors, all races, all ethnicities, anyone. And you're going to find that in any job that you go to, guaranteed. Yeah. You're going to have a mix of personalities, and if we can get along with everybody, no matter, it doesn't matter who you sleep with. You know what I mean? That's the bottom line. If you can go to work and do your job, then that's what's most important. But if we can get past those barriers, I think those barriers that we have are just so passe, or
right.
You know what I mean? It's just it's kind of like old hat.
But it is that interesting double standard that you mentioned. Whereas since again to use the word sexual majority and minority, since there is a sexual majority, we forget that's a component of our overall personality. But if you take someone in the sexual minority, it's like, that's the big thing that makes them who they are. It's like, no, it's, I like Batman. I'd rather talk about that than my sexual proclivities. But since I'm in the majority, that's why I get away with talking about, oh, you like sci-fi stuff, versus, oh, you're a sexual minority. That must be your defining characteristic. And now, like you said about, doing my job, it's irrelevant in a professional setting, hopefully, and let this be a lesson to any faculty out there. We don't want to hear about your sex lives in class, so anyway. And to students, I will say as well. I've made this joke before to my students, but it's very real. The first time I taught about sex in my psychology class I was teaching at St. Louis, I learned to put the disclaimer, no personal stories, because people want to talk about this stuff. But there is that level of taboo, so they're so excited when they have an open area of it, like, I don't need to know your personal stories or what's going on with your significant others. So it is strange that, I guess not strange, I understand it, but it is sad that there is that double standard where this gets to be your only defining characteristic, or at least the big one, broad brushstrokes, and I get to have all these extra ones because it's in the majority there.
But I think it would be good, to have a club where students, that felt that way or were leaning that way could, be a little bit more open with themselves, and thus, have that outlet, and they could, that outlet would help them possibly be a better student. You
mentioned that, so I was going to go finish our interview, but you said something I would love to get your opinion on. Do you think things are getting better, getting worse, and I know these are generalizations, but what do you think about the online world? Is it because, for every story I hear about someone, cyberbullying, which is terrible, I will also hear the stories of, hey, my son came out and, we put these things on Facebook and look at grandma's letter to their son and how inclusive. So I wonder, what is your feeling? Do you feel like it's making us smaller, or is it just more of the same battles and different places?
I think it's more of the same battles, just in different places, yeah.
So we bring our prejudice to digital or analog worlds. Okay, good to know. All right, well, this was our interview with Drew Feathers. Can't get out of my mouth there. Thanks once again for coming, and we're going to take a short break, but we're going to have you back, and you're going to tell us all about Sylvia.
Awesome.
So thanks so much. Welcome back, and before we get into our closing, Jason and I just want to once again thank you for listening, for watching Psych Out in so many different ways. Of course, we're on YouTube under Crowder Psych Out. We're on psychout.podbean.com. We're on iTunes. You can find us there. So please keep listening and supporting us. Keep watching us and supporting us. And we do ask, please review and rate us, because when those numbers go up, those stars go up, we're more likely to be seen by people who don't normally access our site. So you can talk to us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, all under the handle PsychOut66. So whether you're on the internet, you're on your cell phone, you're in your car, you're at your office, there is no place where you can't be exposed to Psych Out. And I say that's a good thing. For those of you who have just tuned in for the first or second time, you notice we talk about current events, we talk about weird science, and we talk about pop culture. And certainly have a number of great guests and interviews, including this week, and some fun stuff coming up next week. So
Thanks, Drew.
Thanks so much. So once again, that's psychout.podbean.com or Crowder Psych Out on YouTube. Well, Jason, they've got the information. They've made it through another episode.
Yep.
We should send them home with a little bit of fun.
Jason and Nathan news.
Yeah, Jason and Nathan news.
So,
Jason and Nathan current events.
Yes. So anyways, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that I spent my weekend in Warrensburg.
Yes.
For my job. I didn't go there just for fun. But it's you don't do much in Warrensburg unless you're doing something with UCM. In fact, the town was abuzz that weekend because Warrensburg was hosting a big debate tournament, and outside of UCM there was a huge marching band tournament.
Oh, man, I love that.
So whenever you're walking from building to building, you're like,
nice.
And then there's arguing going in the
nice.
So,
that's awesome.
Anyways, I want to do a couple highlights and lowlights, or even midlights. I don't know if that's a thing, but Crowder Debate did. We were middle of the road. There were not a lot of community colleges. In fact, there were a ton of Division I schools there, four-year schools, national caliber schools.
Facebook too. Was it that you round you beat?
I did want to say that one of our
was it Mizzou?
It was Mizzou. It was,
Yeah.
so that was one of our debate victories. And
I just stole this thunder.
Yeah, well, just put it in perspective, though. You're talking about Crowder College beating University of Missouri in something. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be chess with Mr. Bishop. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And kudos to Will and Alyssa for doing that. In fact,
good job, guys.
Alyssa's sister, Shelby, listens to this podcast. So, Shelby,
celebrate your sister.
Happy beating Mizzou. And also, Alyssa, who did beat Mizzou, she's a KU fan, so she really likes doing that in and of itself. But anyways, like I said, really tough tournament. But even then, I only took the varsity. They scored about mid-range. And this is another busy week for me because I have bookend debate tournaments. I have one this past weekend, and I have one coming up at John Brown University. So, yeah, but that interrupts your Riff Tracks thing, right?
It does, yeah. Some of you know, Jason and I went on a mandate a while back and saw Riff Tracks, which is the guys from Mystery Science Theater making fun of bad movies.
And we went to Starship Troopers. Which, by the way, if you've never seen the movie, congratulations, because this is a cool movie.
Now, this week, actually, we're kind of in the Halloween season, so on Thursday they're going to be back in Joplin, or rather broadcast to Joplin in the theater. Doing Night of the Living Dead, the original zombie movie in modern American cinema, George R. Romero. So as much as we talk about zombies, I hope to see some Crowder listeners there. Manny and I will be there with some friends, so do show up. If you want to contact me on Facebook or post on Psych Out, I'll give you more information there.
Let's see here. A little Psych Out news, Nathan. I told you I wouldn't even tell you the number until we got here.
Yeah.
Since we've been on YouTube, we'll have a couple hits here, a couple hits there, like 52 for our Undead Romance. But do you know how many views currently episode 31 has?
We get lucky occasion and pass 100, so is it over that?
Yes.
What is it?
272.
Wow! Is that on Podbean?
No, that's on YouTube. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, 272.
Really?
It's bookmarked between one that got 63 and one that got 30. So
wow,
people just went to Green.
And for the record, guys, if you watched our episode multiple times, it knows your IP address, so it won't count it twice. So
wow.
So now maybe a couple of people on different computers watched it again, but still, if we hit 200 already. Nice.
270, closer to 300.
Because Podbean, we were just pushing over a couple 100-ish.
Oh, we're close to 8,000. We're either past 8,000
per episode. That is.
And then we want to get to 10,000. So we'll have a happy birthday. Not a happy birthday. We'll just have a Hey, we made it.
We made a number, a banner.
So thank you for supporting. Oh yeah, and Podbean always has the numbers there, but this was the first one that kind of had like a huge jump.
Yeah.
Like our podcast of Steel on the Podbean website has a ton of listens. In fact, I think it's like over 400. But you know, this day, like you just say, that's your favorite. I really liked episode 31 just because we got to talk about video games, and we got to do it in conjunction with Grand Theft Auto, and you're talking about the biggest selling video game of all time.
Yeah.
With the biggest YouTube video of all time.
All right, let's wrap it up there, Jason. We've talked so much. So thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for paying attention. And thanks for listening to the discussion of LGBT. Sometimes those topics are a little rough for some individuals, but I think it's fun, it's interesting, and we got a lot of people out here who can identify with those issues. So come back next week. We'll throw on the ghost sheet, the vampire teeth, and whatever else scares you, and have some psych out Halloween style.
Ooh, Halloween psych out.
Float on the rain. When the cavalry comes, we're looking for a reason to break down these walls and jump. When the cavalry comes, we're looking for a reason to show you the brave.
They said, I bet